It has been almost 20 years since Pokemon came out, and quite frankly, I would consider myself a very heavy Pokemon indulger, which is confusing because I have never done a Nuzlocke run. Which is why with the release of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I will be attempting to complete my very first Nuzlocke. Alright, considering that I've never done a Nuzlocke before, I kept the rules pretty basic. If your Pokemon faints, it's dead. Just kidding, I'm gonna release it. Now, you can only catch the first Pokemon you find in each area. Now, with the introduction of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, they introduced the Grand Underground, which has Pokemon not normally found in the game. I decided I would catch the first Pokemon I would battle in the underground area, and that this would reset after each gym. Okay, with all the rules laid out, let's begin. Waking up at the acceptable time of almost midday, I installed my Shining Pearl and started my stream. I swiftly completed the intro and picked my starter, Chimchar, and then I proceeded to beat down some innocent Starlies. But it wasn't long before our first big disaster. Oh, this is gonna be awful. I'm already low HP. Don't die! How did I lose already? That's right, fighting the very first trainer, as per my luck, my starter Pokemon was no more. This was incredibly frustrating, but because Dawn had given me some Pokeballs, I decided that I would catch my first Pokemon on Route 2. I named it Platzi after a friend of mine, and I said goodbye to my Chimchar, Jerome. I then had the grueling job of leveling up my Starly. I then beat the first, second, and third trainer. Whew. Made it to Jubilife City, I caught myself a Magikarp, beat up Barry, and made my way to Ouroboros City, catching a Shinx, which I called Daisy after my dog, along the way. Now, here's my next big issue. Because I had lost my starter, the Rock-type gym had just become even more difficult. Starly isn't really good against Rock-type Pokemon, believe it or not, so my solution was to catch something like a Machop or an Onix. In the end, I managed to catch an Onix, named it Brock after a special request, and taught it the HM Rock Smash. Now with this Wombo combo, I managed to sweep through the entire gym and claimed the Coal Badge. Our next destination was Eterna City, so I packed my bags and headed back through Jubilife City, where I ran into some pesky galactic grunts. However, they were no match for my mighty Shinx. Also at this point, Shinx evolved into a Luxio, so that's pretty cool. I then arrived at Floroma Town and received a gift Jirachi, which I put in the PC for safekeeping. And then I made my way to the Valley Windworks, where I caught a Shellos, which I named Chad. Upon entering the Valley Windworks, I was greeted with a not-so-friendly greeting from Commander Mars. But no worries, I made swift work of her and her Peralgly. Swifty. After defeating Commander Mars, I thought it would be a good idea to start trying to level up my Magikarp into a Gyarados. So I was trying the method of switch leveling, which turned out to be an incredibly bad idea against a certain Pokemon known as Bidoof. Now Bidoof knows the move Rollout, which does double damage for each consecutive hit. So you can imagine it does quite a lot of damage if it hits up to 5 times, you could say. Ah! Rest in peace, Suckle. After the tragic loss of Suckle, I had to push forward through Eterna Forest, where I caught myself a Badoo, which I named Little Fella. I emerged from the forest and was given the Explorer's Kit, which led me to the greatest place on Earth, well, more like under Earth, the Great Underground, where I spent days mining for a fossil, and eventually, I found it. Oh, wait, what's this? Oh, is this a fossil maybe? Perhaps? This looks like a fossil. Next, I challenged the Eterna City gym leader, Gardenia. Naturally, having a flying-type Pokemon like Platzi would be incredibly useful for this gym that is prominent with grass types. So it turns out the gym leader just decided to beg for mercy before giving me the Forest Badge. Someone then informed me of a galactic infestation, so I cleared them out, including their commander, Jupiter, and her skunk tank. As thanks for clearing out the infestation, I was gifted this cool green bike. Now at this point, I wanted to evolve my Onix into a Steelix, because you know, why not? But in order to evolve Onix, you need to have it hold a metal coat and have a friend to trade it. Luckily I had the friend part nailed down, but I still needed a metal coat. That's where someone in my chat told me that you can get a metal coat from a Bronzor. but because I was doing a Nuzlocke, I couldn't just catch all the Bronzor I see just for the chance that they might have a metal coat. So I had to teach my Luxio the move Thief, which lets you steal items from wild Pokemon. And luckily on my first encounter with the Bronzor, I managed to steal the metal coat, but I accidentally killed it before catching it. Before evolving my Onix, I made my way back to Ouroboros City, so I could turn my fossil into a real Pokemon. From the fossil, I was presented with a shield on, but I guess the Grand Underground isn't so grand after all because I lost my little fella. Oh, for fuck's sake. But in exchange, I did catch myself a pretty sweet Ponyta. Anyways, moving on, I made my way to Hearthrop City, and I got this cute little egg, which I got from some old dude, and I evolved my Onix into a Steelix, as well as my Daisy evolving into a beautiful Luxray, and Chad evolving into a slimy Gastrodon. Things were looking pretty good right now. I also trained Staravia into a Staraptor, so it could use the move Close Combat, which would play a big role in the upcoming gym. Now the third gym leader, Maylene, specializes in fighting type Pokemon, and with Staraptor, this would be a pretty good advantage. Maylene opens with her Meditite, and I open with Staraptor, which I outspeed an Aerial Ace, KO'd in one hit. Next up is Maylene's Machoke, another Aerial Ace KOs the Machoke. Now Maylene's final Pokemon is Lucario, and since Lucario is a Steel type, all of Staraptor's moves are pretty weak against it. All except one, Close Combat. And as you expect, I KO'd the Lucario and claimed the Cobble Badge. After defeating Maylene, I made my way to Pastoria City, and my egg hatched into a nice little cute Happiny, which I put away for safekeeping. Fuck, it's a Happiny. I made it to Pastoria City and challenged the Chad radiating Surfer Energy, Crasher Wake. Crasher opens with a Gyarados, and I open with Daisy. I did a bit of a meme play here, and I tried going for a Thunder. Thankfully it hits, and I KO the Gyarados. Next is Crasher's Quagsire, and I have to switch into Platzi here. I hit Quagsire with an Aerial Ace, which takes Quagsire down to about half HP. Quagsire follows up with a Rain Dance, and next turn I finish off Quagsire with another Aerial Ace. Crasher then sends out his last Pokemon, Floatzel. Now Floatzel knows the move Ice Fang, which is a bit scary for Platzi, so I switch into Daisy. Now the interesting thing is, while the battlefield is raining, Thunder will have 100% accuracy. So Floatzel hits me with a priority Aqua Jet, and I follow up with a Thunder, which KOs the Floatzel, and that's how I claimed the Fen Badge. I then had to chase a little grunt around the town. I picked up some medicine for some dementia-ridden Psyducks. I then made my way to Celestic Town, where I talked to some creepy old guy. Anyway, the next gym leader, Fantina. Now, like most ghosts, she's kind of spooky. Fantina opens with Drifblim, and I open with Luxray. I go for a bite, which brings Drifblim's health down to about 25%, and Fantina goes for a Strength Sap, which heals Drifblim to full HP. I then have to swap into Steelix here, and Fantina goes for another Strength Sap. She then follows up with a Hex, and I go for a Rock Slide. She goes for a Will-O-Wisp, and I go for another Rock Slide. She goes for another Hex, which brings me down to about 7 HP, and I miss my Rock Slide. I just barely survived the burn damage with 1 HP. I then have to swap into Chad and hit Drifblim with an Ice Beam, knocking out Drifblim. Fantina then sends out her Gengar, and I respond with Daisy. Fantina goes for a Sludge Bomb, which poisons me, and then I go for a bite. I then have to swap into Platzi, which gets hit with a Sludge Bomb, which brings it down to about half health. I then have to go all in on an Aerial Ace, which knocks out the Gengar. Fantina's final Pokemon, Mismagius. So I had to send in Chad, which was a big mistake as Mismagius knows the move Magical Leaf, and Chad barely survives on 28 HP. I then have to swap into Brock again and hit Mismagius with 2 Rock Slides, defeating the Mismagius and claiming the Relic Badge. Next up, I go to the Grand Underground and catch myself a Bronzor, which I name Razzadazza, giving it a rare candy to evolve it into a Bronzong. I then make my way to Canalave City, where I go to Iron Island to train up my Ponyta to a Rapidash. I also lost Chad to a fucking wood hammer from a Sudowoodo, which really got me riled up. Oh my god. And then I got an egg from Riley. Up next on my wanted list is Byron, who specializes with steel types. Byron opens up with a Bronzor, and I open with Rapidash. I go for a Flame Charge, which takes Bronzor to about half health, before Bronzor goes for a scary Trick Room. Now Trick Room makes the slowest Pokemon attack first, for 5 turns. Bronzor then uses Sandstorm, and I finish it off with a Flame Charge. Steelix is Byron's next Pokemon, and I forgot that Steelix knows the move Earthquake, so I get hit with an Earthquake, and go down to a comfortable 6 HP. I then Fire Blast the Steelix, which, because of Sturdy, means it's on 1 HP. I then had to heal my Rapidash, and then go for another Fire Blast, which KO'd the Steelix. Byron's last Pokemon was Bastiodon, so I swap into Bronzong to wait out the Trick Room. I then had to swap back into Rapidash to use Flamethrower, which KOs the Bastiodon, which is how I claimed the Mine Badge. Professor Rowan then informs me that Team Galactic has actually been avoiding taxes, so we need to track them down and hand them a citation. Lake Valor was my first destination, and I met up with Commander Saturn, whose only real threat was his Toxicroak. However, Toxicroak was no match for Platzi, who aerial aced it and KO'd in 1 hit. I handed Saturn a citation, and then I moved on to Lake Verity. Turns out Commander Mars was here as well, so I dispatched her and left for Lake Acuity. This was on the same road as Snowpoint City, so things were about to get a bit chilly. I caught a Snova, which I called Froyo, and I decided to harden up my team before facing the Ice-type gym. After a bit of training, my team was ready to face Candace. Who's Candace? Candace opens with her Snova, and I open with Rapidash. Now Snova has the ability Snow Warning, which causes the battlefield to hail. I go for Flame Charge, which KOs the Snova. Candace then sends out her Sneasel, and I go for another Flame Charge, which KOs it. Next is Metacharm, which is a little bit scary, so I switch into Platzi, and immediately Aerial Ace and KO the Metacharm. Last is Candace's Abomasnow, so I switch back into Rapidash and hit it with a Fire Blast, claiming the Icicle badge, as well as Snova evolving into an Abomasnow of my own. After defeating Candace, I made my way to the Grand Underground, where I caught our carry Pokemon, Gibble. Well, not carry just yet, but soon. I call it Shanky, and I remembered the tax evasion was still present in Lake Acuity. So I go to Lake Acuity to catch Barry in the act of simping with Commander Jupiter. It turns out that Team Galactic didn't have proper hygiene standards at their HQ, so I let myself into their HQ, where my Gibble evolved into a Gabite. I then informed the boss that they need to update their health certificate. He gets really angry at me and then challenges me to a battle. Obviously, his Pokemon are weakened by the symptoms of COVID, and I win. I then have to scale Mount Coronet to try and stop Cyrus opening a portal to a time before COVID. While climbing the mountain, my Gabite evolved into its Chad form, Garchomp. When I get to the top, Barry apologizes for simping for Jupiter, and he helps me beat Mars and Jupiter. After we defeat them, Cyrus challenges me to our final battle, where I beat him with ease. The legendary Pokemon Palkia appears, and I catch it with an Ultra Ball, as a flex. Oh, we did it! Nice. Now with all this trash dealt with, I can get my final gym badge. Volkner is the 8th gym leader, and he specializes with electric-type Pokemon. The battle begins, and Volkner sends out his Raichu, and I lead with Shanky. Raichu uses Surf, which doesn't do a whole lot of damage, and I go for a Dig. The Dig connects, and I KO the Raichu. Next is Volkner's Octillery, so I swap into Luxray, I use Thunderbolt, and KO the Octillery. Ambipom is up next, and I swap into Platzi. I hit a close combat. This knocks Ambipom out of the park. And up last is Volkner's ace, Luxray. So I swap into Brock, and I hit it with Dragon Breath after Dragon Breath until I claimed the Beacon Badge. After I defeated Volkner, I went to the Grand Underground for the final time, and I caught a Houndoom, which I called Shelly. I swiftly sped through Victory Road and made it to the Elite Four. It was time to begin the end. First up was Aaron and his bug types. Gonna be completely honest, I sweeped his entire team with Platzi. Next was Bertha and her ground-type Pokemon. She opens with her Quagsire, and I open with a Abomasnow. I go for a Giga Drain, which one-shots the Quagsire. Up next is Sudowoodo, so I switch into Platzi. Normally, I would be a bit scared of a Sudowoodo because it has Rock-type moves, but Bertha's Sudowoodo doesn't actually know any Rock-type moves, so I KO the Sudowoodo with a close combat. Next is Golem, so I switch into Shanky. I hit Golem with an Earthquake, which it survives with 1 HP, thanks to Sturdy. And then it goes for a Rock Polish. But because of Abomasnow's Snow Warning, the Golem is defeated with a single pellet of Hail. Next is Bertha's Wishcash. Now I swap back into Froyo, and I hit it with a Giga Drain, which brings Wishcash's health very low. And Wishcash follows with a Bulldoze, which doesn't do a whole lot of damage. Next turn I finish it off with another Giga Drain. Bertha's last Pokemon is Hippowdon, so I keep Froyo in and Giga Drain the Hippo until it has been defeated. Next is Flint and his fire types. He starts with a Rapidash and I start with Shanky. I outspeed the Rapidash and use Earthquake, knocking it out in 1 hit. Up next is Flint's Lopunny, which I break out into Platzi for. I knock out Lopunny with 1 close combat before swapping back into Shanky for Flint's Steelix. I hit Steelix with an Earthquake, which leaves it on low health, and it retaliates with an Iron Tail, which leaves me with less than half health. Thankfully, the leftovers heal me up just a little bit. I hit Steelix with another Earthquake before taking it out. Next is Flint's Driftblim. Now this thing is quite annoying because it starts setting up minimizers, which makes me miss all of my attacks on Daisy. And then it baton passes into Infernape. So I swap back into Shanky and KO the Infernape with a Dragon Claw. And I finished off Driftblim with Daisy's Thunderbolt. The final member of the Elite Four, Lucian and his Psychic types. He starts off with Mr. Mime, and I start with Steelix. Because Mr. Mime is part Fairy type, he is actually weak against Steel type moves. So I slowly chip away at Mr. Mime's health with Flash Cannon. Next is Lucian's Metacharm, which I swap into Platzi for. Without hesitation, I go for a Brave Bird, which demolishes the Metacharm. I swap into Houndoom for the incoming Girafarig, and I set up a nasty plot while it goes for Trick Room. It then uses Thunderbolt while I go for another nasty plot, and I manage to get another nasty plot in before I hit it with a Flamethrower, which almost KOs it. I get 1 full restore in before I go for another Flamethrower, and that is the Girafarig down. Next is Alakazam, which I swap into Daisy for. I use Crunch and 1 hit it. Last is Lucian's Ace, Bronzong. So I swap into Shanky and hit it with 3 crunches before taking out the final member of the Elite Four. Finally, it has all come down to this. Me versus champion Cynthia. I quickly taught Houndoom the move Dark Pulse before the upcoming fight. Now as the battle begins, Cynthia sends out her Spirit Tomb and I lead with Houndoom. I start with a nasty plot which builds up for around 3 turns, and I full restore on the 4th turn. I hit Spirit Tomb with a huge Flamethrower, which 1 hit KOs it. Cynthia decides to send in her Gastrodon next, so I respond with Froyo. I get a Giga Drain off, which 1 hit KOs the Gastrodon. Now currently we have 6 Pokemon against Cynthia's 4, so things are looking pretty good. She then sends out her Roserade, and I respond with swapping back into Shelly. Roserade hits me with a pretty nasty Sludge Bomb, which poisons me and leaves me on 4 HP, but I get a Flamethrower off, but it just isn't enough as my Houndoom succumbs to the poison and hail. I swap into Platzi to try and finish the job off, but Cynthia has other ideas. She swaps into Milotic. So I respond with a swap of my own into Daisy. I start using the Charge Beam, and by beam number 3, Milotic just barely survives and beats my Luxray. But then she succumbs to her burns. Lucario is up next, so I swap into Platzi, and it only took 1 close combat, and that is Lucario done. Cynthia then decides to swap back into her injured Roserade, which I swiftly ended. Lastly was Cynthia's Garchomp, so I swapped into Froyo, and with incredible luck, Garchomp uses Swords Dance, and I 1-hit KO Garchomp with an Ice Beam, becoming champion of the Sinnoh region and completing my first Nuzlocke.